say that a young lady's been telling you, I love you, for the past 6 weeks that you've been dating her. Let's say that tonight your dad calls you up and says, son, I've been paying her $1,000 a week to love you. Would you be bummed out in any way?
There's a different stimulus added to it.
Do you believe that you can, that one person in that equation, do you believe that you can be genuinely in love with that person, even though that they're faking it the whole time? Basically, do you believe that love always has to come in pairs?
I am convinced that
Christianity started to spread to today. What about all those people who had never experienced Christianity? Are they all in hell?
No. I do not know how God will judge those who've never heard about Christ, because Christ never specifically addressed your excellent question. But he makes 5 points. First point is, God is just. No one's going to get ripped off. American Bar Association, 400,000 members. Largest volunteer organization in the world. When a lawyer, part of the American Bar Association, is in court and a judge is partial, prejudiced, unfair, that lawyer reports that judge to be reprimanded and maybe to be barred from being a judge. Why? Because we have an understanding of justice. Where does that understanding of justice come from?
Our own interpretation of what justice is.
I disagree. I think that if you say that it's just to be racist, I'm going to look you in the face and say, you're wrong. Racism is unjust because it's denigrating a human being who has been given dignity by God. Therefore, racism is wrong. I don't think it has anything to do with culture. I think there is a law above the moral law in America. You agree or disagree?
I disagree.
Okay. Then let me ask you something.
I don't know.
The Nuremberg Trials, 1945 to 1949, Nuremberg, Germany. When the Nazi lawyers said to the Ally judges, you are not allowed to judge our clients because they followed their Nazi culture. They were just carrying out orders. If the Nazi Germans had won World War II, we wouldn't even be having the Nuremberg Trials. And all of a sudden, the Ally Council didn't know what to say. But the guy was Robert Jackson. And Robert Jackson came back with a response. There is a law above the law. In other words, there's a law above Nazi Germany law. There's a law above American law. And that law above the law says you're not allowed to gas Jews or anybody else.
Where does this law say what the law is?
You see, the only way there can be a law above a cultural law is if there is some God, some moral lawgiver who creates that law.
Okay, where's the law? How do we know the law?
We know the law 2 ways. By following our consciences and by using our rational minds.
I'm pretty sure they use rational minds to define the other many other things as just.
Okay. But obviously, Nazi logic that said Jews are inferior and therefore we can gas them is irrational. It's wrong thinking. And the reason it's wrong is because all human beings have been created in the image of God. That is why we all have equal value and dignity. But if there is no God, we don't all have value and dignity. If there is no God, we're all cosmic accidents. If there is no God, your birth is an accident, your death is an accident, which means the only thing that lies between those 2 accidents is another accident. Your life.
Why are accidents bad?
They're not bad. They just happen.
Birth is an accident. Life is an accident. It's the
sum of a mathematical equation.
It's an ultimately inevitable occurrence, but it is an accident.
Fine. Well, if he's an accident, what's wrong with me kicking him in the ribcage?
You have to have a sense of empathy. You don't think we get all of our morals from religious texts, do you?
No. We get our morals from conscience, hopefully. And conscience ties us into moral absolutes. But if you think about it, if there is no God, there's no moral absolute. All morality is relative. So maybe you think it's wrong for me to kick him in the ribs, but I think guys with his color hair and his style haircut deserve to be kicked in the ribs. So wham! I'm not wrong, I'm not right. You're not wrong, you're not right. It's all relative.
I disagree. I think you're kind of wrong. It's a survival mechanism. You don't kick him in the face or in the ribs because then he's probably likely to get up and do something much worse to you. It's not.
And if he has connection with us, we might do something to you too.
It's a survival mechanism. Morality stems from the need and the desire to propagate the species. If you go around killing, murdering, raping, then your species isn't going to last too long.
How does rape prevent your species from continuing?
It's not conducive to whatever allows your species. It's social gatherings. We're a social species. You rape someone, they're probably not going to think too kindly of you, and you're going to disrupt that social order.
If rape produces babies, how does rape hurt the propagation of your species?
The species is not purely propagated simply by numbers. For example, just earlier in the class earlier today, insects and sustain, Dr. Ording, very good teacher. He said that if you have a species and your pure goal is just to make as many babies as possible, that's not conducive to the survival of your species. For example, if you and your wife, looks like you're married, no offense intended, but if you and your wife decide to have 100 babies, that's not necessarily going to be conducive to the survival of your genetics, simply because you can't support 100 kids. A lot of them are probably going to be neglected. You might not be able to provide for all 100. You're much more likely to propagate your own genetics if you're going to have 2 kids. Just settle with 2 kids and put as much of your energy and time into them as much as possible. That's what it is. It's a selfish gene theory. So
why did Mother Teresa live among the dying in Calcutta, India, helping them to die with dignity? What motivated her?
What motivated Mother Teresa? A sense of empathy. But you're going to try, are you saying that all empathy, all has to come from some divine presence? Or can we not, as intelligent beings, look through each other's eyes and say, hey, I wouldn't appreciate this. I have a sense of empathy.
I am convinced that what motivated Mother Teresa was love. Not a biochemical reaction, not a drive to preserve the genetic pool. I am convinced that Mother Teresa really loved hurting, dying people, and that's why she tried to help them. Love is one solid piece of evidence that God exists, because love goes beyond a chemical reaction. Love goes beyond genetic drive.
I don't think it does.
No.
And not to mention the fact that, love can be any number of other things. We have quantifiable ways to measure what happens to the human brain when love is the characteristic you're describing.
Okay, good.
There's rationale behind it, is all I'm saying.
All right, fine. So if your girlfriend looks you in the face and says, I love you, what is she really saying to you?
She has a deep caring respect for me.
A deep caring?
Who knows?
What is deep caring? I thought all of reality was complex biochemical reactions from your worldview.
Well, yes, absolutely.
All right. So what
there's
your
an
girlfriend
advantage to
really
having her
means
life.
is you excite me sexually or in some other way, and I have a biological reaction to you.
And we know I try to do that as much as possible.
All right. Good. So what's the difference between your girlfriend and a plastic Barbie doll?
Different stimulus to activate different parts of the brain.
Thank you.
But
Thank you. Now live that out. That's very well put. You're spot on.
it's still the way you're created, the way that you were created. Something between the other person, interacting with them, their stimulus causes different parts of your brain to react, and there can be one subtle difference between her and another person.
Yep.
That will make you not have that reaction.
That's right. You're exactly spot on. If there is no God, all of reality is matter and energy, and all we are is highly biochemical reactions going off in our brains. We call some of them love, we call some of them hate, but they're simply biochemical reactions. There is no such thing as love, which is a free decision to care for someone, even if it hurts me.
It's just a name we put to the way
Exactly.
our brain reacts to the stimulus.
That's exactly right.
Semantics.
That's exactly right. So, let's say that a young lady's been telling you, I love you, for the past 6 weeks that you've been dating her. Let's say that tonight your dad calls you up and says, son, I've been paying her $1,000 a week to love you. Would you be bummed out in any way?
There's a different stimulus added to it.
Do you believe that you can, that one person in that equation, do you believe that you can be genuinely in love with that person, even though that they're faking it the whole time? Basically, do you believe that love always has to come in pairs?
I am convinced that you can love your enemy. To love means to actively wish the well-being of your enemy, to pray and to work for the well-being of your enemy. Or I'm convinced you can hate your enemy and try and cut him off at the knees. You choose. And your experience of that free will shows you that you're not just a highly complex biochemical reaction. Although there are chemical reactions, no question about it, there's more to you. There is a personality, there's a you, there's a soul, there's a rational free mind. And you choose whether to forgive or to seek revenge, whether to love your enemy or hate your enemy and destroy your enemy. And guess what? You don't have to do either. And your girlfriend doesn't have to love you.
So
part of why you enjoy her love is because she freely chooses to love you. Well, sir, the only way that can exist and be true is if there's more to reality than matter and energy. There's got to be some type of God who creates us with this free will, this rational mind that is free to think on your own.
So you're saying free will does exist?
Absolutely.
And in your belief of your religion, God has sight over all time at all times. So if God has sight over all time, then how is free will even possible if he can see everything at all times? He can see the course of time throughout aeons, throughout the existence of everything, in your belief. So how does free will come into the question?
Good question. Because when we say that God is all-knowing, we do not mean that God writes on a piece of paper what you and I are going to do tomorrow, locks it in a bank vault, and then you and I tomorrow have to do what's written on the piece of paper. That is not what we mean. Rather, what we mean is, due to God's perspective outside of time, God sees tomorrow today. You and I are locked into the dimension of time. God is eternal. He is outside of the dimension of time, which means right now, God knows who's going to win the Michigan State University of Michigan football game. Not because he's predetermined it, but because he's outside of the dimension of time, he's eternal, he sees Saturday, today, Thursday. That's all what we mean.
Isn't that really just kind of the illusion of free will then? I mean,
No.
if he knows what we're going to do, don't we really not have a choice?
All right, if you see a movie one time, and then you see it a second time, you know the second time what the characters are going to do. Does that mean that you have determined what they're going to do?
No, but I didn't create the characters.
Fine. The movie producer knows what the characters are going to do.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean he's programmed them to do it.
Yeah, it does.
That's what he
And the
does.
writer.
That is his job.
Yeah,
the director and the writer.
The writer predetermines what the characters do.
Well, yes, that's true. They don't have to do it. They can not do it and get fired, right?
Yeah.
But the point is, when you're outside of a dimension, like God is omnipresent, which means God can be in Lansing, Michigan, and Calcutta, India, and London, England at the same time. Because he's outside of the dimension of space, he can be omnipresent. And because he's outside of the dimension of time, he can see tomorrow, he can see Saturday, today.
If God already knows everything that's going to happen, and God created everything, then there is no free will.
God did
Period.
not create
Period.
everything. Why do you believe God created everything? He didn't create this shirt. He didn't create your bike.
But by your logic, he did create the materials that were used to put that together. He did create, in essence, the people that made that shirt.
Yeah, but then he gave people a free will, and so we can use our rational minds to create bombs or to create clothing.
He knew it was going to happen years before it did, right?
Because he's outside of the dimension of time, he sees
Because
all of
you say
time at a
we have
glance.
Free will, but then you define it as there is no free will.
No, there's free will.
Who says there's a being looking over it?
Well, I think it's rather clear when you study the vastness of the universe, the cosmos, and when you see the amazing order and design, that there's got to be a designer. If I tell you there's no designer behind your designer genes, that's crazy.
Dude, we're talking
But
about
that's
the fucking
things-
universe. We're not
yes.
talking about designer genes.
Yeah, that's right. And do you think the universe is just a tad bit more complex than your designer genes?
You made a comparison between the universe
We
and the
are
jeans
talking
I'm
to
wearing.
Yes, design was my point. If you demand that something like designer jeans must have a designer, it is irrational to say the amazing complexity of the universe is an accident. It's done by chance. It's far more reasonable to say, wow, there's an amazing designer behind it all.
Who says it's one thing? Who says it's a being? Who says it's a thing?
Uncaused cause. Designer.
You're
Maybe it's many.
putting an unknown. You're putting something that you claim You're putting a theory to an unknown. That's all you're doing.
No.
And we have.
I'm examining reality.
No.
Yes, I'm examining reality, and reality as I experience it is, you don't have a car come together as a result of a hurricane passing through a scrap metal yard.
How do you know that there's not something beyond God?
Because by definition, God is an uncaused cause.
The definition given by man, something else created. We don't have the knowing of what he is or what it is that made us be here. You are creating a theory. Your theory is God. Something that we can relate to because you have no idea. You're being like, okay, it has to be like, okay, a designer made my jeans, so the complexity of all this has to have been created by something else, by somebody, by something with intelligence. But it doesn't have to be.
Okay, give me one example in your experience of life where design comes about by accident.
Okay, there can be, say things fall from a tree and it makes an image. There's the whole like, oh, there's Jesus on my toast. It's an accident.
I use the tree itself.
Yeah, the way it looks.
That's
the
the
way
issue
it
we're
looks.
debating. We're debating nature.
Well, right, but
We're nature. We are nature.
All right, no, fine.
We are acting
If the
within
pine
realm of
needles,
nature.
if the pine needles fall down in such a way as to communicate, John loves Mary.
It can be a complete accident.
Okay. I am convinced if I go up a mountain and I come across a bunch of stones, and those stones are arranged to say, John loves Mary, it is more reasonable for me to believe there's a dude who came up here before me who arranged those stones in that way. For me to conclude John loves Mary in stones came about by accident is highly improbable.
Yeah, because stones have a large mass. The fact for them to form in that is really improbable. For things to fall from a tree and form that, it's more probable. There's more time
Okay.
for it to happen.
and given no evidence for
Then if we are playing poker and I'm dealing, and if I deal 20 hands of 4 aces to myself, and as you guys are pulling your guns
4 aces?
to blow me away, and if I turn to you and say, wait a second, there are an infinite number of universes, and we just happen to live in the universe where I deal 20 straight hands of 4 aces to myself, are you going to buy that?
No,
Thank you.
because we live in a social. It goes back to what the gentleman here who is now gone, what he said. We live in a social order. We live with people around us. This is why we think as God being an image like us. Everything is.
I'm more of a
possibility.
skeptic than you are. My experience of life tells me you never get order and design coming about by chance, by accident. I don't care if it's academics, I don't care if it's engineering, I don't care if it's medicine, I don't care if it's sports. You never ever get order and design coming about by chance.
Truth, even when it's among multiple people. I'm going to go back to the UFO example. People all over the nation, all over the world have claimed to have seen UFOs. Can they all be lying? We can't know because that's something we don't know. But it's unlikely that UFOs are grabbing people and then probing them in their intimate places. And so I think that I'm just going back to your argument. Your
No,
original
you're not.
argument.
You're making a totally different argument.
I'm not.
Yes, you are. And you better be smart enough, Ellen, to see that. And I think you are. You're a very intelligent person. I am not saying because many people believe in Jesus, Jesus is the truth. That is not my point.
That wasn't my point
My point
either.
is an historical issue. Did the dead Christ historically rise from the dead? Over 500 people claimed to have seen him risen from the dead, and they were willing to die, not for their belief. They were willing to die for what they claimed to have seen, the dead Christ risen from the dead.
That still doesn't validate it as a historical scientific truth in relation to what you claimed, that when people are willing to die for something that they have seen, large numbers of people, that makes it worth
That's
taking
evidence.
as truth.
If
But
this guy
I'm saying-
says, I
I'm
saw
saying that
this
that's
man
not
risen
accurate.
from the dead, and he's willing to die for what he claimed to have seen that is powerful evidence that he's speaking the truth.
Am I not communicating?
Just think it through. Watch the movie. Catch Me If You Can. What did Frank Abagnale do? He posed as a Pan Am pilot. He posed as a doctor. He posed as a lawyer. And he was lying. But notice that what he did was he desired the benefits of being a pilot, being a doctor, being a lawyer. There is nothing desirable about being martyred. But Matthew, John, Peter, James said, we have seen Christ risen from the dead, and they were willing to die for it. They gained nothing from it except their own death. But they insisted, we saw him risen from the dead. That is a powerful piece of evidence that indeed Jesus rose from the dead.
What I'm saying is very much based in the scientific truth. And I know that you're saying we're talking history, but when people look back on our time, they will say, yes, there is a history of people claiming they have seen UFOs, that there is a history of that. But you're also extrapolating it to mean that there is truth in that, therefore we believe in the resurrection of Christ. And I'm saying that you can't necessarily draw the conclusion between historical fact and what you would base your life ideology on.
All right, Alan, I apologize for miscommunicating. I'm going to try one more time with you.
I don't think
you
I'm
have not gotten my
misunderstanding what you're
point.
saying.
You still missed my point, and I'm beginning to wonder what's going on. My point is not that people don't lie about what they see. They do lie about what they see at times. But just because a person lies about what they see doesn't mean that eyewitness testimony is invalid. Second point, eyewitnesses who saw Christ risen from the dead, if anybody says, I saw something, and they're willing to die holding tightly to the claim, I saw this, that gives tremendous credibility.
No, it doesn't.
Absolutely,
no,
yes.
It doesn't. It gives no
You and I
credibility.
part company there. If this guy says, I saw something and I'm willing to die for the truth that I saw it, that lends great credibility to his claim.
No, it doesn't.
Just look at Watergate.
It
Dean,
doesn't.
Ehrlichman, and Haldeman, three brilliant American lawyers, were not willing to go through too much pain in prison to cover up what they knew to be a lie. The Watergate scandal. Come on, just think about it.
I am thinking about it, and I understand what you're saying. I will repeat back at you what you're saying, and to verify that I understand.
Thank you, Ellen. I'd appreciate that.
People are who are willing to die for something that they have seen or claim to have seen,
Right.
are given more validity than
Correct.
people who perhaps are not willing to die. I understand that.
Good.
That act in itself, the I'm willing to die act, does not give it enough validity to consider it a fact that you can base a long chain of other events on. Like religion. Yes, there are people who believe that Christ was resurrected, and that's fine. But we can't state that as a scientific fact just based on eyewitness testimony, no matter how much they're willing to die for it. There are people who are willing to die because they won't get chemotherapy because they truly think that homeopathy will work.
Ellen, you are misdefining science and history very clearly. Man, you cannot scientifically prove to me
But can you address
that
my
Napoleon,
point?
I am addressing exactly what you've said.
Okay.
Here's your breakdown in your thinking. Your breakdown is you always go back to science. Man, you cannot prove anything historically by science. Why? Because science is based on repeating an experiment. If you can't repeat an experiment scientifically, it is not scientific truth. It is impossible to repeat the Battle of Waterloo, the Civil War, the Gettysburg Address, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, the I Have a Dream speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. It's impossible to repeat those events.
But we have
Historical knowledge is different from scientific knowledge. Historical knowledge is based on the trustworthiness of eyewitness testimony.
Not necessarily.
Scientific knowledge is based on the repeatability of an experiment.
We have the death mask of Winston Churchill. We saw the body of Abraham Lincoln when he had a bullet in his head. We have these scientific facts that are then considered to be historical facts. I'm not saying that history and science are exactly the same. I'm just saying that I assume you're going to continue to make claims about belief in God and whether or not you believe that's scientifically provable. Therefore, I'm trying to go back to your original resurrection point and say, and perhaps get you to acknowledge that it is not scientific fact.
Man, I've just told you.
Okay, it's not
Nothing from
scientific
history
fact.
can be scientifically proven. It's
I just
impossible.
said that it can.
Nothing.
Yes, it can.
You cannot scientifically prove that John Wilkes Booth is the guy who fired the gun that killed Abraham
Yes,
Lincoln.
we can.
You cannot prove to me scientifically that Abraham Lincoln was assassinated in Ford Theater.
Yes, yes,
No,
we
you
can.
cannot. That's
there
not
was
a scientific
his blood
proof.
all over his wife and all over the booth that they were in.
So
There
maybe
was a
somebody threw the
bullet
blood on
in
him
his head.
out of a can. Ellen?
What the heck are you talking about, man? This is ridiculous now. You're
No,
going
Ellen,
into
your
the realm of
thinking is ridiculous because you refuse to distinguish between scientific knowledge and historical
No, I
knowledge.
do. I do say
And there
that
is
they are
a
different things.
fundamental difference between scientific knowledge and historical knowledge. And if you aren't willing to admit that, you're going to be in trouble academically.
Also, there's experimental science and there's like exploratory and like discovery science. They're very different things. I think that you have this idea that science is only the scientific method when not all science can be subjected to the scientific method. But
It's
that's
not
a different
science.
point. That's a different point.
If
No,
you
it is
cannot
science.
repeat it in Calcutta, India, in London, England, as well as in Lansing, Michigan, it's not a scientific fact. Science is based on the repeatability of an experiment that comes out the same way 100 times out of 100.
So, but there's more of a probability that it did not, right? That something amazing did not happen by accident.
I have never gotten an A on an exam by accident. I have never made a basketball team by accident. I made the basketball team in college because I had an ability to put a ball through a hoop 10 feet above the ground on a pretty consistent basis. And I got A's in school because I studied and I understood the order and design of history, science, poetry, mathematics. That's why I got good grades. I flunked exams and I didn't make the starting lineup in my basketball team because I did not have the ability to bring order out of chaos by chance. I couldn't even bring order with my intelligent mind at times. So my own experience of life tells me it takes a lot of work to bring order out of chaos. It takes an intelligent mind.
Because we live in a social order.
No.
Yes.
No.
We don't live in a social existence.
Sir, my ability to put a basketball through a hoop 10 feet above the ground
I know that
has nothing to do with you loving, hating me, or being my friend or not my friend.
But it has
to
something
do
to do
with
with you
me having the
joining the
physical
team.
coordination to throw a basketball through a hoop. And I either have that coordination or I don't. And I can promise you, people don't make the Michigan State basketball team by accident. And if they do make it by accident, you guys are going to lose every game this coming year. You know very well that the men who make the men's basketball team with Coach Izzo are very coordinated. And they can bring order out of chaos. They can take a ball from 20 feet out, shoot it, and the thing goes swish. That's why they make the team. They don't make the team because they sit out at half court and lob it, and by accident it starts going in. It's not the way life goes, guys.
Because
order and design come about as a result of an intelligent mind working hard to bring it about. So you've got something far more complex in this universe than putting a ball through a hoop. You've got laws of nature that are incredibly sophisticated. It's far more reasonable to believe there's an intelligent mind behind it all than to believe it's a cosmic accident.
If I may interject for a second, what you're doing is you're going back and you're saying, okay, well, whether you believe in evolution or not, something obviously started it. You're making a design argument. I get that. But what it seems to me that you're doing, and most people do with design arguments, is there's something that they can't, like that we as humans can't wrap our minds around. How did we get here? How did where we live get here? And I'm talking like from the beginning of the existence. I'm not talking about me standing here right now.
Right.
And the point that everybody seems to come to that makes a design argument is, well, I can't figure it out. God must have done it. I'm not saying I have the answer when I say I think that, the Big Bang Theory is a little bit more probable. I'm not saying that's correct. I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying it seems a little bit more probable because there are tests that can be done and there's evidence that can be used to illustrate that that is a possibility, minute as it may be. Where people that make design arguments, they don't want to accept the fact that, well, I don't really know. So clearly these, teachings by man are what must have obviously caused it. Like, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, I don't know, but that seems to be where Like, that seems to be what happens in most design arguments.
Sorry to hear that. My whole point is, you are making a fundamental, rational mistake. Here's what it is. You are reducing truth to scientific truth. I accept scientific truth, but I also accept philosophical truth.
Philosophical truth comes about by man, which is all an interlocking of electrical systems going off, creating stimulus, and it's just an interaction between beings that create thought processes. And then we put those thought processes down on paper. And we take those thought processes and try to apply them to what makes the grass green. And we've come to the point, like thunder and lightning. We've gone from believing that there's God's form for it, but now we know what causes it. What I believe religion is looking to man. It's looking upon man to describe why these things are about, instead of looking at nature and what there actually is to describe it.
Can I ask you a question?
Science is a study of process, how things happen. It's a great study. Modern science was begun by followers of Christ. Johann Kepler, the father of modern astronomy, as he peers out into the stars at night, exclaims, "Oh God, I am thinking your thoughts after you."
This goes back to, is the design argument is simply the same thing Kepler was doing when he was saying, I don't know what this is, clearly it was God. That's what design is. Kepler and the things that he did that with, eventually, that became wrong, and we figured out what caused those things.
The design argument is not a scientific argument. It's a philosophical argument. It's a philosophical argument that asks the question, is it more reasonable to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind design and order, or is it more intelligent and rational to believe that design and order are the result of chance? That is not a scientific question. That is a philosophical question.
Right. And
I am open to using science to find truth, but I'm also open to using philosophy to discover truth. The question, is there an intelligent mind behind the universe or not, is not a scientific question. It is a philosophical question. Don't mix the two, please. That is why it is impossible for science to disprove God's existence. In the same way, it's impossible for science to prove God exists. Science is a simple study of process. How does the organism work? Philosophy, theology, asks the question, behind the process, however well we understand the process or not, be it thunder, lightning, be it genetic mutation, whatever, the philosophical question is it more intelligent to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind the process, or is it more reasonable to believe there's no intelligent mind behind the process? It's just a chance occurrence.
I'm not disputing anything that you just said.
Good.
Truthfully, I'm not. Because everything every point I made about Kepler, and Kepler saying, I don't understand this, therefore God did it, that's not a scientific process. He's not saying that obviously God exists because of science, because I don't know, like, all it is science didn't come far enough, and he wasn't able to understand those things, so he turned to the realm of philosophy, as you would put it, and said, okay, it was God. But when you look at these philosophical inquiries from the past that have been answered by science, I find the design argument to be incredibly weak.
It's impossible for science to answer a philosophical inquiry. A philosophical inquiry, sir, is not a scientific inquiry. It is a radically different field of knowledge. That's why, for you to tell me that because science progressed past Johann Kepler, therefore the design argument doesn't hold, is absurd. It's totally absurd. I don't care how far science progresses. You still have this philosophical question, is it more reasonable to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind order and design? Or is it more intelligent to believe there's no intelligent mind behind order and design? So I don't care how far science progresses, you still have that philosophical, rational question. There once was a family of mice. They lived in a piano. They enjoyed the music that came from the great piano player. But one day, one of the little mice got really brave and he climbed up into the piano, and to his amazement, he found out the music does not come from the piano player, the music comes from wires that reverberate back and forth. Well, the little mouse returned to his family of mice and he said, guess what, guys? There's no piano player. I'll tell you where the music comes from. It comes from wires that reverberate back and forth. So the family of mice no longer believed in a piano player. They had a totally mechanistic understanding of their universe. Wires reverberating produced music. Until one day, another little mouse got even braver, and he climbed up even further into the bowels of the piano, and to his amazement he found, no, the music does not come from the wires. It comes from the hammers that strike the wires. That's what produces the music. Well, the little mouse returned to his family of mice, and they redid their scientific theories. They redid their mechanistic understanding of their cosmos. But they still enjoyed the music that came from the piano player. Science is a wonderful, very valuable, precious study of process. It's good. It comes right out of a biblical worldview. A reasonable God created an orderly world and gave us rational minds that we can unlock the secrets of the universe. As Einstein said it, think God's thoughts after him. As Kepler said, and as Einstein said, I want to understand how the Creator did it. So science is great, but the question still remains, is it not more reasonable to believe that there's an intelligent mind behind the process? And I think the answer is obviously yes, but we all have to answer for ourselves, obviously. But I'm pleading with you guys, come on. Designer comes from design. If you see design, you push it back far enough, you meet a designer. Now, Jesus Christ claimed to be revealing this designer in human terms, in a way that you and I, with our limited, finite minds, can begin to understand. The evidence of the way Christ lived, treated people, taught ethically, died loving and forgiving his enemies, and then rose from the dead, point to his credibility. You can trust Christ to reveal the designer accurately.